Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and your podcast co-host. This week we continue in our series of podcast interviews on some of the hot issues that are coming before the legislature in the final weeks of the legislative session. And there's no hotter political issue in California these days than redistricting reform and Governor Newsom's proposal to go back to the old ways of politicians drawing lines and try and rig elections for Congress in California in his party's favor. This week we have perhaps the best guest we could find to talk about redistricting reform, and that's Matt Rexroad. Matt is literally, if you look at all the things that he does in his life, he's the guy in that old Dos Equis commercial, one of the most interesting men in the world. He's been a longtime former legislative staffer. He's been one of the top political consultants in the state for Republicans. He's done a lot of work as a staffer and consultant on various redistricting efforts over the years. He's now a deputy district attorney, in addition to his work for candidates and on redistricting efforts. And we talk with Matt, we really get a primer from Matt of all the ins and outs of how does redistricting normally work, what would this proposal mean for California, what are some of the concerns with this proposal, how would it impact elections in our state if voters were to approve it. We also talk about some of the other interesting things in Matt's life, like he just got his first conviction as a deputy district attorney in Colusa County, and he'll talk about a very interesting juror that he had to face in that trial. We also talk about his very personal interest in the foster care system, and more. So I think you'll find it's a very interesting and timely discussion. So after the break, please join our discussion with Matt Fleming and myself with Matt Rexroad. Thanks for joining us. We'll get back to Next Round in just a moment, but first, are you getting PRI's regular email updates? If not, go to pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get the facts you need to fight back delivered every week to your inbox. Every week, PRI sends you what you need to know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, and gives you the free market ideas needed to save our state and our nation. By going to pacificresearch.org and clicking the sign up button, you can sign up to have Policy Alert, our weekly roundup of all the best ideas from PRI scholars delivered to your inbox. Or you can sign up for event updates, so you're the first to know when PRI is coming to your community with great events. So sign up now at pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get PRI's content delivered to your inbox each week. Well, Matt, welcome to Next Round Podcast. It's great to see you. Haven't seen you in a bit, and it's great to see you here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So when we were thinking about having you on, it really couldn't be better timing with the topic that is the topic in Sacramento these days, which is the governor and Democrats' efforts pushing a mid-decade redistricting plan. And, there are many things to talk about with this plan. And I'm thinking about it. I remember back in the day before we had redistricting, independent redistricting, I remember there was a little office on, it was either K Street or J Street, where staffers like me would go visit you, and Don and Bernd kind of huddled in a little room with, at the time, fancy computers and lots of maps.
And it was above an Indian restaurant. And so at lunchtime, Indian scented food would rise up through the floorboards and plague us all.
That's right.
Which I love Indian food, but not every day at lunchtime.
That's right. So maybe let's start our discussion with kind of a broader question. Maybe first give our listeners kind of the 30,000 foot view of kind of what's happening here, and what are some of your main concerns about it? Why should people care about this and be so concerned about it?
So from a broad 30,000 foot view, not all states have independent redistricting commissions. California, Michigan, Arizona, a couple others have less independent commissions, but Texas does not. And the House of Representatives is actually very close from being Republican or Democratically controlled. And usually in a midterm election, the office who holds, the party who holds the White House usually takes a bit of a hit in the midterm elections. So all that being said, if history repeats itself, Republicans should lose a few seats at least in the midterm elections. Well, that would most certainly change the control of the House. And so President Trump has said that he would like to try to pick up as many as 5 seats in the state of Texas. And so the Texas state legislature could do that. Governor Newsom has responded by saying that he would, if Texas is going to do that, well, then California would pass a ballot measure that would be on the November 3rd ballot or November 4th ballot, and it would allow one time, he's saying it'll be one time for the legislature to draw a map, which would be included in the ballot measure, with the attempt of a partisan gerrymander to take at 5. He said first it was 6, now it's 5 seats back if Texas acts to retaliate for those. And so it's kind of it's playing. He thinks he's responding to the Texas decision or anticipated decision.
So in your view, kind of at the, keeping at the 30,000 foot level, what do you think is most concerning about this effort? And it seems to me like it's a 2 wrongs don't make a right kind of a thing here. But what's so concerning about these mid-decade redistricting processes in general, and then this effort that we're going on with here in particular?
Well, the reason we don't want a mid-decade redistricting is because the data is the same. We don't have a new census. The census comes out, and the idea behind redistricting is that you rebalance for population. And if your listeners are in California, large parts of Riverside County really weren't there 30 years ago. And so you need to balance out the population under the one person, one vote concept. What's troubling for me about this trade is that the likely 5, maybe 6 members of the California delegation who are Republicans, they hold really safe seats. And so we are trading, assuming this all goes forward in Texas and California and the plans were adopted, we would trade 5 really good Republican seats for 5 seats in Texas, which I'm not sure we win every time. We would win maybe none of them this election, maybe 5, but they would be toss-up seats at best. And so, or maybe it'd be 3 and 2 or something like that. So we're not even getting a good trade. And I'm not sure that it would be to the extent that even if we did pick up 5 seats in Texas, I'm not sure that would be enough to control the House of Representatives anyway. So I'm not sure this is a good deal all the way around. The danger of having mid-decade redistrictings is that anytime you have a swing election and one party takes control over the other party, they would just be bludgeoned into nothing because the party in power would completely disadvantage the others and change the rules for the elections going forward. And, that's not the way we've traditionally done it. I think it's a harm, because anytime that we'd have a swing election, it would just set up the rules for elections going forward from there. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. It's mid-district or mid-decade redistricting now. Why not just start doing it every 2 years just to ensure that you keep getting, the people in power back in power? It's such a corrupt process. It's a race to the bottom.
And, the courts have said that they will allow partisan redistrictings, but they don't allow racial redistrictings. And so this is kind of a race to the bottom, as you say. I think it's a mistake. We should redistrict every 10 years. You play by the rules. You do 5 elections in each, and then you reset for population again. But this is where we're just having everyone now jump to the table to do that. The legislature is being a little hypocritical on this because they passed a law here, 10 years ago that prevents cities and counties from doing mid-decade redistricting to prevent this sort of thing. And so if it's not good for cities and counties to do, I'm not so sure why it should be allowed for the legislature to do in this one time.
So, when we talk about, we've gone over a little bit about redistricting is you kept it at a pretty high level, but, and I think that when people get into, for as much as people love talking about politics nowadays, I think when they get into the machinations of things like redistricting, their eyes glaze over just a little bit. But as you know from your work as a legislative staffer and consultant, the redistricting process is actually one that lasts more than a year. Can you take our listeners behind the curtain a little bit? What usually is involved in a normal redistricting process, and why is what Gavin Newsom is proposing here such an affront to the democratic process?
Well, up until 2000, Tim mentioned earlier the office we occupied in 2000. 2001. And that was at that point in 2001 in California, the redistricting maps for Congress, legislature, and Board of Equalization all were just simple majority vote bills. And so in 2001, largely a political deal was cut for an incumbent protection plan. And we drew those maps and basically everyone voted for it and off we went. In the case of what we've had the last two cycles since Proposition 11 and Proposition 20 has passed, you have people, citizens, and it's very difficult to recruit people to serve on this commission. They apply and they're supposedly independent and not partisan hacks, not political staffers, are appointed to this commission with 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 4 people who aren't in either of those parties. And some of these people tend to be retired people. It's an older population, but then they go through the process of learning about the state and then drawing lines with the assistance of staff. And it's a pretty long process. I mean, they travel all around the state. They did some more Zoom stuff during the pandemic, but the previous commission from 2011 traveled all over. They took thousands of public comments and then they did the best they could drawing the maps. They aren't allowed to use political data or partisan registration or any of that sort of thing. And they do the best they could. I've been critical of the commission because I don't think they've done as well as they could, but I actually believe it's a far better process than what we would get if the legislature just did it.
Follow up on that point. We've seen some Republicans, including Donald Trump, saying that California's lines today are gerrymandered, but obviously the Redistricting Commission drew them. You've been involved in this a long time. Do you think that's a fair criticism of these maps to call them gerrymandered? And if Republicans aren't, getting as good a map as perhaps could be, what would you argue Republicans could do differently in future decades to get a map that more closely relates to their voting strength in the state?
Well, a couple things. One is, and a lot of people, Republicans, are upset with the commission in terms of the way things turned out in 2011. But what had happened is that we'd had such huge demographic shifts in the late 1990s and early 2000s in California, huge demographic shifts, that when they finally did a fair redistricting that wasn't an incumbent protection plan, there were enormous shifts. I mean, just huge shifts because it wasn't about incumbent protection. It was about communities of interest. And so things changed fairly dramatically. And so Republicans were upset about that. And then but the reality is that if we're about to see what a partisan gerrymander is like, we're going to see these maps today, tomorrow, at some point. That's a partisan gerrymander. And so we have the commission, and we have right now 9 members of Congress who are Republicans from California. We're about to have a partisan gerrymander taking us down to maybe 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it is, certainly less. So I'm not sure how Republicans can say, wow, under the Redistricting Commission, it's a partisan gerrymander, but when we actually do a naked partisan gerrymander, we lose votes. So Republicans have been critical of the commission, but I don't see how they can look at that and say, oh yeah, no, we would rather go with a partisan gerrymander and just let the legislature do that. The commission, in my mind, has largely protected several Republican seats that wouldn't need to exist under a gerrymander.
We'll get back to our great guest in just a moment. But first, are you following PRI on Facebook? By following PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, that's all one word, you'll be the first to read free market ideas from PRI's terrific team of scholars on all the hot issues like education freedom, single-payer healthcare, crime, homelessness, green mandates like the ban on natural gas appliances, and more. Plus, when you follow PRI at facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute, you'll be the first to know when tickets go on sale for PRI's must-attend luncheons, dinners, and galas across the state. And you'll be first in line to secure your spot to hear great speakers like Michael Schellenberger, Gordon Chang, Steve Hilton, and many more. So go to facebook.com/Pacific Research Institute and follow PRI today so you'll be the first to know.
Switching gears here, you have a really interesting background, and I'm always amazed when I learn whatever you're up to now, because you really do just do a lot of different things. But, you previously served as a Yolo County supervisor for a few terms. Why did you step down, and what did you like best about serving in office, and how was it going from a strategist to a candidate to an incumbent?
Yeah, so I was the mayor of Woodland before that, which I really enjoyed, and I did serve for 12 years on the Yolo County Board of Supervisors. I was going to run for another term, but I wasn't going to campaign. I mean, I just wasn't going to do that. So I was willing to do the job, but I wasn't going to campaign to do it. So when somebody else announced they wanted to run against me, who was personally upset with me over a really good fiscal issue that I actually proud of, I just said, forget it. I'm not going to do this anymore. But I really did like my time on the Board of Supervisors. I learned a lot. And what I like the most about it actually is that, county government, they take care of people who don't have a lot of resources. They're running state programs. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a labyrinth of difficult bureaucracy. And if you know how to help somebody, some simple calls can really make people's lives a whole lot better. And so I really did enjoy when people would call or email me, and I answer all my emails, I answer all my telephone calls. I would be able to get them to the right place and be able to help them. We didn't have a partisan board in any way. We fought it out on all kinds of different issues, and I really did enjoy that.
Now, as if you don't have enough things to do, Matt told me that you recently won your first felony trial. And so I guess I knew you were a lawyer, but I had forgotten that. But when do you find time to do all of these things? Tell us a little bit
So,
about that case. And, do you have any other degrees hanging on the wall that we don't know about?
I've been a deputy DA up in Colusa County since April of 2024. It was always something I wanted to do. I go up there and they are a great office and they teach me a tremendous amount and I enjoy it. They're wonderful people and I'm learning something that I've always wanted to learn. And so I'm 57 years old. I'm probably the oldest, rookie deputy DA in the state. I'm okay with that. But a funny story for you. So I did win my first felony trial here about a week and a half ago, and it was a stolen vehicle. I got another one coming up here in a short time. But my first trial last summer, I came out of the judge's chambers before the trial and I sat at the table ready to do it. It was a poaching case and I was ready to go. And my investigator leans over to me and goes, hey, Matt, Jerry Brown is in our jury pool. And I'm like, come on. Actually, I said something a little bit more crass than that. But anyway, he said, look over your right shoulder. And sure enough, I looked over my right shoulder and there was Governor Brown sitting in the front row. And he ended up being juror number 3. And he was the foreman of my first jury trial. And he actually hung the jury, which didn't make me super happy. But it was kind of a wild experience having Governor Brown being there in the courtroom. And just so everyone knows who's saying right now, why didn't you throw him off the jury? My boss would not let me throw him off the jury, even though it was crystal clear he should have been thrown off the jury.
Can you imagine being a fellow juror in the deliberation room with Jerry Brown? That must have
Yeah,
been
the judge at break said, Mr. Rexroad, do you want to guess who the jury foreman is? I'm like, Your Honor, I don't need to guess. I think we all know. I mean, how are you going to have anyone but a 16-year governor, attorney general, secretary of state? How are they going to choose anyone else?
So another I don't want to diminish it by saying an interest of yours, but you are a strong advocate of the foster care system and you had endured a long drawn out legal battle with Yolo County. Can you tell us a bit about your foster care advocacy efforts? What drives you in this policy area and what you'd like to see change in order to improve the foster care system?
So actually that's really good timing of the question. I literally, right before I got on with you, I just wrote a letter to the little boy that we used to care for and just popped it in the mailbox before I sat down. But, my wife and I, we're a Christian household and we wanted to have the opportunity to serve as foster parents. And we did that. I don't know how many kids have come through our household over time, 20. I don't know. Some have been here for, one little boy was here for 2.5 years. Another young lady was here for probably close to a year, maybe, I don't know. But that little boy who was with us for 2.5 years, the county decided to send him back to his biological mother. And my wife and I didn't agree with that decision. And so we tried to, legally, we sought to have the case, a court decision basically to grant us custody of the child. And, I'm very libertarian in my views. And I have to tell you that when it comes to those in the child dependency system, it kind of goes out the window because, I don't believe these kids are responsible for the actions of their parents. And some of these parents are really jacked up. Now, I don't want, children taken away from their parents and ripped away from them, but there are some kids out there who are really in unfortunate circumstances through no fault of their own. And as somebody who is pro-life, I really felt it was time to, walk the walk on that. And so, we took care of this little boy. I loved him, still love him. We see him, once a month, but it was disappointing to lose that case, and we did. And there is a viewpoint out there in the foster care child dependency world that we're going to send this child back to his or her parents at all costs. And I don't believe that's the case. I think there are some parents who shouldn't have children, and courts need to step in to prevent that because the parents are unfit to serve. And so we fought that out. We lost, and I'm sad about that. I think about it most every day. But that's the way it works. But I do think as for those people who really believe in pro-life principles or really believe in caring for children, one great way you can do that is by being a foster parent.
So we also know around the time you stepped down from the Board of Supervisors, you had some transitions in your work in your longtime political consulting firm. You kind of shifted to doing, more work on redistricting and still doing a little work with candidates. So aside from your deputy DA work, what's next for you in your work on the political side of things?
Well, I've still been running. I've never really stopped running political campaigns. I can do more work as a deputy DA during the off year. So in 2025, I've got my goal to meet personally in terms of becoming better in the courtroom. But I've always continued to run political campaigns. I'll have Strategy Insights is my company that I run political campaigns with now, and we'll probably have anywhere between 10 and 20 clients this next year. And we would expect to win most of those races and try to do a good job for all of our clients.
And then on top of all that, you are a columnist at the SACB and Southern California News Group, which includes the Orange County Register and LA Daily News and San Diego Union Tribune. How do you approach writing columns and decide what to write on? And what would you like to do going forward with writing? Did I hear that you're writing a book?
I'm not writing a book. A book, actually a podcast I listened to, they had Senator Cory Booker on it here recently. He said writing a book was one of the worst experiences of his life. I don't think I can write a book. I thought about writing one about my experience in Iraq, but I don't think I've got the chops to write a book. But I do like writing for the Bee. I like writing, period, because it really makes me sit down and think about what I believe and why. And so, with these opportunities I have, these editors let me largely write what I want, and I have to show my work. And I kind of like it sometimes when people send me back nasty grams telling me how dumb I am or how smart I am or whatever. As long as they show their work too, right? If they point out something that they don't agree with my analysis on, that's fine. If they just want to call me names, that's fine too. I can press delete and move on, and that's okay. But for me, that writing is really more about trying to show my work on why I've come to a certain policy decision. Sometimes people like it and sometimes they don't. And my response almost always is, well, great, that's your opinion. Why don't you write a response? And of course, they never do. They just want to tell me that I'm a jerk on Twitter. And that's fine.
Well, as we close, we call this podcast Next Round because of our proximity to wine country and our love of discussing politics and public policy over a great glass of California wine. So what wine or beer or cocktail or other beverage are you enjoying these days while juggling all the stress of being a DA, running campaigns, writing columns, and all the other wonderful things that you do?
So I have to tell you that during the pandemic, I worked on an MBA at Davis, and I largely drank beer in the back of my garage and learned finance, and it was great. I actually had a great time. But then I got this Fitbit, and I started actually tracking my heart rate. I don't drink hardly at all anymore. I sleep better. I exercise better. It's far better for me. So I have an ice machine that it's dedicated ice machine to me. So I have lots of cold ice, and I drink ice water pretty much all day long. But I hardly ever drink it all now.
Well,
are you disappointed, Tim?
No, because I will say over the years, we asked that of nearly every guest. We even put together a wine map with all of everyone's different recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And the most interesting answers to that question come from people who say what they're drinking is a non-alcoholic beverage. We learned Ted Gaines likes this kind of gourmet root beer, and we learned people have very fancy coffee tastes, and they told them all about that.
Tom,
All
Tom,
about that. So
Tom
Well,
Campbell, Tom Campbell drinks deflated Diet Coke, deflated
yes,
regular Coke, and or diet. Maybe it was either diet or regular, but deflated, and actually will ask the waiters to deflate it at a restaurant.
okay. Well, that seems odd, but I do have a hint for your listeners right now, and I don't know how much longer it's going. But Whitey's Jolly Cone in West Sacramento has peach shakes right now, and if it's on Jefferson Boulevard, and I've been out there twice with my family to get peach shakes, but a treat right now that's on during peach season is peach shakes at Whitey's Jolly Cone in West Sacramento. You will not regret it.
I can second that. I have had those, and it probably is the best milkshake you could ever have.
It is the
Something
best
about
milkshake
a
I've ever
peach
had.
milkshake is
Yep.
just so good. So, well, on that note, we should adjourn and maybe go have a peach milkshake. Matt, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, gentlemen. Fight on.
If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Ichon. Hope you'll come back again for next round with PRI.